The cafe was alive with quiet chatter, soft jazz music playing in the background, and the clinking of spoons against porcelain cups. But in that ordinary scene, something extraordinary began to unfold. The door creaked open, and a woman entered slowly, guided not by sight, but by the tapping of her white cane. Heads turned instinctively, but not out of pity. There was a calm grace in her every movement, like someone who had long learned to walk confidently in a world built for the eyes. What no one knew, however, was that her presence was about to unearth a truth buried in the past. And one man in particular, seated just a few tables away, would soon find his entire world collapsing with a single look, or rather, the absence of one. She chose a table near the window, her fingers gently brushing across the edge of the wood before she sat. Her posture was poised, peaceful, but if someone looked close enough, they might have noticed the subtle trembling of her hands. As the waiter approached to take her order, he asked if she needed help with the menu. She smiled politely and replied that she already knew what she wanted, something she hadn't tasted in years, something that reminded her of another life. Just then, a man who had been sipping his coffee froze, the cup suspended in mid-air. His eyes widened, and his face turned pale. It couldn't be, but her voice, so soft, so familiar, was unmistakable. He stood up as if in a trance, ignoring the stares of those around him. Every step he took toward her felt like a battle between hope and fear, like approaching a ghost that only he could see. When he reached her table, he didn't speak. He didn't dare. Instead, he simply dropped to his knees. The woman's brows furrowed slightly, sensing the disturbance, and she asked softly, "Is everything all right?" But he couldn't answer. Not yet. Tears welled in his eyes, and his lips quivered with words that refused to come out. Because the woman sitting in front of him, the woman who couldn't see, was the very person he had searched for across continents, across years. The one he thought he had lost forever. In that silent moment, time slowed. The air thickened with unspoken emotions, and the cafe, once filled with idle chatter, grew quiet, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Patrons turned their heads not just in curiosity, but in awe, sensing that something sacred was happening. A reunion not marked by embraces or declarations, but by presence alone. He reached in his coat and pulled out a small locket, the kind worn around the neck, worn close to the heart. Inside it, a photo, a little girl and her older brother, smiling by a lake under a summer sky. Her fingers brushed against it. She gasped. What happened next would move even the coldest heart, because sometimes the most powerful reunions don't begin with recognition. They begin with revelation. And in this cafe, in the middle of an ordinary day, a stranger had found what he never thought he would see again: forgiveness in human form. This wasn't just a meeting. It was destiny, dressed in silence and sealed by a heartbeat. And as the world around them resumed its rhythm, one question hung heavily in the air. How do you face someone who lost their sight? Because of you? The locket trembled in her hand, its metal warmed by the years and the weight of memories. Her fingers traced the edges, then paused on the small indentation where the clasp met. She didn't need to see it. She remembered it by heart. It was a gift from her father on her 8th birthday, meant to hold the two people she loved most in the world, her brother and her mother. The gasp that escaped her lips wasn't one of fear, but recognition, of something lost and suddenly found in the most improbable of ways. The man remained on his knees, tears slipping down his cheeks without resistance. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times, but nothing could have prepared him for the real thing. Her presence shattered the wall he had built over the years to keep guilt at bay. She hadn't changed much. Her hair was longer now, and there was a maturity in her features, but her voice, that voice still echoed the innocence of their childhood. His lips parted, and a single word escaped in a whisper: "Claire." Her breath caught. That name hadn't been spoken to her in over 15 years. Not like that. Not with the trembling vulnerability of someone who had lived with absence as a companion. She tilted her head slightly, the locket now clutched close to her chest. "Who are you?" she asked, though deep down, a part of her already knew. It wasn't just the voice. It was the silence between words, the energy in the air that somehow felt like home. "I'm sorry," he finally said, and his voice broke under the weight of two words that had been locked inside him for over a decade. The cafe around them seemed to fade into the background. No one spoke, no one moved. It was as if the world had created a sacred space just for the two of them, to reopen a wound and maybe, just maybe, start to heal it. He continued, "I didn't mean to disappear. I didn't mean to leave you alone in the dark." Her fingers loosened around the locket, and it slid back to the table. Her other hand reached forward slowly, searching, hesitating, until it found his face. Her touch was feather-light, as if confirming he was real. When her fingers brushed his cheek, she whispered, "Daniel." And that single name, spoken with uncertainty and hope, shattered him all over again. Years evaporated in an instant, as if time itself had been waiting for this touch to reset the clock. Daniel closed his eyes as her hand lingered against his skin, and for a moment, he was no longer the man haunted by regret, but the boy who used to carry her on his back down to the lake every summer. Her presence peeled back the layers of pain, and in that small cafe corner, they were children again, just for a heartbeat. "I thought you were dead," she said softly, her voice cracking. "They told me you had drowned, that there was nothing they could do. I waited by the shore until nightfall. I waited every day for weeks." The words poured out, quiet and trembling, but powerful enough to make Daniel wince. He hadn't known what they told her after he vanished. He had only known he had to run. Now he realized that in trying to protect her, he had broken her in ways he never imagined. "I almost did," he replied, his voice nearly inaudible. "But not the way you think." He swallowed hard, the weight of his own past pressing against his chest. "I got caught up in something, Claire. Something dangerous. I couldn't come back. And then, when I finally could, I didn't think I deserved to." His eyes searched her face for signs of anger, of resentment, but all he saw was pain, and something even harder to face, forgiveness. Claire lowered her hand slowly, resting it on the edge of the table. "I stopped looking after a while," she confessed. "Not because I gave up, but because I had to survive. I lost my sight the winter after you disappeared. It was an infection," they said, "but I think it was grief. I couldn't see the world anymore, not because of my eyes, but because you weren't in it." Her voice didn't rise in anger. It felt like a whisper soaked in sorrow. Daniel's heart shattered into pieces he didn't know he still had. He reached across the table, his hands shaking as he took hers gently into his own. "I didn't know. God, Claire, I didn't know." But she squeezed his hand, not out of comfort, but to anchor him. "You're here now," she said simply, "and that means there's something left to say. So say it." The weight of her words sank deep into Daniel's chest, making it harder to breathe, harder to think. But in her calmness, he saw strength, a strength he didn't expect, and perhaps didn't believe he deserved. He looked at their hands, intertwined now on the table, and wondered how such a delicate touch could hold so much history, so much unsaid pain. "I've rehearsed this conversation so many times," he confessed, "but none of those words feel right now that I'm sitting in front of you." Claire tilted her head, listening not just to his voice, but to the silence behind it. She had learned long ago how to hear what people didn't say. The gaps, the trembling, the breaths held too long. "Then don't rehearse," she replied. "Just tell me what happened." Her voice wasn't demanding, it was patient. Patient in the way only someone who's had everything taken from them can be. The kind of patience forged in darkness. He exhaled, long and slow. "I left because of the money," he said. "Dad had debts. Dangerous ones. After he died, they came after me. I thought, if I stayed, they'd come for you too. So I disappeared. I thought I was doing the right thing." His jaw tightened. "But I didn't protect you. I only made you suffer. I should have found a way. I should have come back." Claire's lips parted slightly, as if tasting each word before responding. "You were just a boy," she murmured. "We both were." Her voice trembled for the first time. "But the night you vanished, something inside me broke, and it never healed right." She turned her face slightly toward the window, though she could see nothing. "You were my eyes long before I lost my sight. You showed me beauty. You made the world feel safe. When you left, I forgot what color felt like." Daniel blinked rapidly, tears threatening to fall again. He couldn't change the past. He couldn't erase the pain. But he could tell her the truth, every ugly, broken shard of it. "I ended up on the streets," he admitted. For a long time, I had no name, no home, just guilt. I kept that photo from the locket in my coat pocket all these years. Your smile reminded me of what I had to survive for, even if I never saw you again. Claire was silent for a long moment, processing each syllable with the same care one might use to trace the contours of a cherished memory. So all this time, she said finally, you were lost, and so was I, just in different ways. Her fingers brushed the side of her cup, now cold and untouched. Maybe it wasn't the blindness that changed me. Maybe it was learning how to live without light, without you. Daniel's throat tightened. If I had seen what you were going through, I would have crawled back, no matter what it cost. His voice cracked. I thought I was protecting you by staying away. But maybe I was just too afraid to face what I'd done. He looked down, ashamed. You deserve better. The cafe, though bustling just moments ago, seemed quieter now. A waitress near the counter had stopped wiping a glass, watching the pair with cautious curiosity. The air felt charged, like the pause before a storm or a prayer. And as Daniel looked back at Claire, he realized that her stillness held more courage than any battlefield he'd survived in the streets. I don't need better, she said, her voice like silk stretched over scars. I just need truth. And this conversation, it's more than I ever expected to get. She paused, fingers playing lightly with the edge of the locket. But tell me one thing, Daniel. Why today? Why here? Why now? His eyes dropped to the ring on her necklace, the one that had belonged to their mother. I saw you by accident, he said. I was walking by. I heard you order the same drink she used to love. And then you laughed. It was faint, but it was your laugh. I would have known it anywhere. He looked up at her, heart exposed. It wasn't a choice. It was fate. Claire's lips curved into the smallest of smiles, one that didn't quite reach her eyes but hinted at a flicker of warmth within. Fate, she echoed, the word rolling off her tongue like a melody from a forgotten lullaby. I used to believe in fate, back when you and I would lie under the stars and name constellations like they were friends. But after you vanished, I started thinking maybe fate was just another word for loss. Daniel swallowed hard, the memory of those starlit nights crashing over him like a wave. Maybe fate isn't about preventing pain, he said. Maybe it's about leading us back to the people who mattered when we're finally ready to face them, even if it takes 15 years. His hands were still holding hers, as if afraid that letting go would turn this moment into another haunting dream. She turned her face toward him, the blankness of her eyes contrasting with the precision of her emotion. You sound like someone who's lived in shadows, she whispered. Someone who's learned to find light through cracks. Her voice didn't judge, it invited understanding. I've lived there too. But light, it doesn't feel the same unless someone helps you see it. His lips trembled. I want to be that someone. Again, if you'll let me. He hadn't meant to say it aloud. Not yet. It had just come out, raw, unrehearsed, desperate. The room around them seemed to fall away again, leaving only the table, the locket, and two souls still aching from the years they had lost. I know I can't undo what happened, but I can stay. This time I can stay. Claire's fingers moved slowly across his knuckles, pausing at each ridge, each callus earned from a life harder than he deserved. It's not about undoing, she said gently. It's about choosing what comes next. And I haven't chosen anything for a long time. Maybe it's time I do. Her voice held a quiet resolve, like dawn breaking slowly through fog. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves in the alley, and the faint chime of a bicycle bell passed by the cafe door. Life continued beyond those walls, unaware of the transformation taking place at the corner table. Inside, however, a new kind of silence had settled, no longer heavy with sorrow, but delicate, full of possibility. Claire let out a slow breath and leaned back slightly in her chair. Daniel was afraid to speak, afraid that pushing too hard might break the fragile bridge forming between them. So he waited, letting her dictate the pace, letting her silence speak as loudly as her words. I never imagined you'd come back, she said finally, voice low but steady. And if you had asked me yesterday what I'd do if I saw you again, I wouldn't have had an answer. He looked down, shame flickering in his eyes. I almost didn't come in. I stood outside that window for 10 minutes, watching, wondering if you'd even recognize me, wondering if I'd ruin your peace just by being near. He chuckled bitterly. But you were never the one who needed to be afraid. I was. Because seeing you again meant seeing everything I ran from. Claire nodded slowly. Fear makes people do desperate things, she said. But running only makes the shadows stretch longer behind you. She reached out once more and placed her hand over his. And maybe, just maybe, this isn't about fear anymore. Maybe it's about bravery. Yours. And mine. Daniel gripped her hand gently, reverently. Then let's be brave together, he said, not as a plea, but as a vow. Not a promise of perfection, but of presence. Because the kind of love that survives silence, distance, and time is not loud. It is steady. And in that moment, the air between them shifted, not back to what was, but toward what could still be. The rhythm of the cafe returned gradually. Distant laughter, cups clinking, a barista calling out an order. But their table remained untouched by the noise, like an island of stillness in the middle of the tide. Claire leaned slightly forward, her unseeing gaze fixed in Daniel's direction. Tell me, she said softly, what happened after you left? Where did you go? What did you see? Daniel hesitated, not because he didn't want to share, but because so much of what he lived through was soaked in pain. At first, I ran. Took buses, hitched rides, slept in shelters, sometimes in parks. There were days I forgot my own name. But every time I wanted to give up, I pulled out that photo. You kept me alive, Claire, even without knowing it. She listened intently, her thumb brushing the edge of the table unconsciously. There was no bitterness in her posture, only a quiet ache, the kind you carry after too many years of not asking questions for fear of the answers. And did anyone ever help you? She asked. Anyone see you for who you were? He smiled faintly. A woman in Nevada gave me a sandwich and a job washing dishes. A priest in New Mexico let me sleep in the church basement for 2 months. And a blind veteran in Arizona taught me how to walk with my back straight, even when I felt hollow. His eyes gleamed with gratitude. But no one ever made me feel seen the way you did. Even now, Claire's breath caught in her throat. That's the thing about being blind, she said. You learn to see differently. Not with your eyes. With your heart. With your memories. Her voice turned quiet again. And I still see the boy who swam across the lake just to bring me a lily. The one who said I'd never be alone as long as he had breath in his lungs. Daniel blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by the innocence and weight of that memory. I remember that lily, he said with a soft laugh. It had ants on it, and you screamed until I shook them off. His voice grew tender. But you held on to it all day, pressed it into a book. You said it was your favorite flower because it came with courage. Claire smiled. This time was full. It lit up her face, revealing traces of the girl she once was. It still is, she said, because courage isn't loud. It's not a shout. It's a whisper that says stay, even when it hurts. Her fingers brushed her collarbone, where the locket rested. That flower dried and crumbled. But I never threw it away. Silence returned, not heavy, but sacred. Daniel felt himself breathing differently, like his lungs had finally remembered how to inhale hope. You've always been braver than me, he said. Even now, sitting across from the person who abandoned you, and still offering him your hand. Claire's face softened, maybe because I was waiting for this moment, and I didn't even know it. Her thumb ran across the locket once more, as if drawing strength from its cold metal. But I have questions. Deep ones. Ones that have haunted me. Can I ask them? He nodded instantly. Anything, he said. You deserve answers. No more silence. No more running. He braced himself, heart pounding, not from fear of judgment, but from the fear of losing the chance to finally be known, completely and without pretense. Claire sat back slightly, collecting her thoughts like one gathers scattered petals from the floor. Her voice, when it came, was steady but fragile, like porcelain balanced on the edge of a table. The night you disappeared, did you mean to leave without saying goodbye? Or did something happen that stopped you? Her fingers gripped the edge of the table, not in anger, but in a desperate search for clarity that had eluded her for too long. Daniel closed his eyes. He had dreaded this question the most. I meant to come to you, he said. I had a note written. I was going to slip it into your coat pocket before I left town. But they came earlier than I expected. 2 men. I heard them at the door. I panicked. I left through the back window and never looked back. His voice cracked. It's haunted me every day since. She inhaled slowly, letting the words settle deep. So I wasn't forgotten, she whispered. You just ran out of time. There was a flicker in her tone, not forgiveness yet, but understanding. A release of one of the many knots she had carried in silence. I always wondered if I had done something wrong, if maybe you got tired of me, or needed to be free. No, he said quickly, urgently. Never. You were the one thing in my life that made sense. You were my peace. My only real family after Dad died. His hands clenched in a fist before relaxing again. I didn't leave you. I lost you. And I've paid for it in every empty room I've ever slept in since. Claire's head tilted slightly, and for a moment she said nothing. Then, quietly, she asked, "Why didn't you try to find me sooner? Not even a letter, a message." It was a question soaked in quiet pain. Not an accusation, but a wound that had never truly closed. Daniel's throat tightened, and the shame returned in waves. "Because I thought I didn't deserve to be found," he said. "Every time I had a chance to reach out, I imagined your life without me. Imagined that maybe, just maybe, you were better off. That you had rebuilt something I shouldn't break again." Claire nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of that confession. "But I wasn't better off," she replied. "I built a life, yes. I learned how to live blind. I even learned how to laugh again. But I never stopped feeling like something was missing. Like I had left a part of myself somewhere I couldn't reach." His eyes welled with tears again. "I thought by staying away, I was protecting you from more pain. But all I did was replace it with silence." He looked directly at her, even though he knew she couldn't see him. "If I had known what your days were like, the surgeries, the darkness, the loneliness, I swear I would have crawled back, no matter what was chasing me." Claire's lips pressed into a thin line, as if holding back a storm of emotions. "You left a hole in my life," she said, her voice trembling, "and no one could fill it. Not doctors, not friends, not even time." She paused, letting her hand find the cup again, this time lifting it to take a sip, perhaps to steady herself. "But you're here now, and that has to mean something." Daniel nodded. "It means everything," he said, "because if there's still a piece of you that believes in me, then maybe I can start believing in myself again, too." He reached across the table, gently laying his palm over hers. "We lost the past, but maybe we haven't lost the future." Claire didn't answer right away. Instead, she let the silence stretch between them, a silence that no longer felt like distance, but like space being cleared for something new to grow. She turned her hand under his and gripped it gently. "The future," she echoed, her voice thoughtful. "It's a strange thing to talk about with someone you once mourned." Daniel swallowed hard. "Do you still mourn me?" he asked, not out of vanity, but out of fear, the fear that her healing may have come at the cost of moving on entirely. The kind of moving on that leaves no room for return, for forgiveness, for beginnings. Claire tilted her face downward, her expression unreadable. "I don't know," she said honestly. "There were days when I hated you. Days I blamed you for everything. The silence, the darkness, the loneliness. But there were also nights when I still heard your laugh in my dreams. Nights I held the locket and whispered your name just to remember how it sounded." Daniel's throat tightened again. "I never stopped whispering yours," he said, "even when I forgot what safe felt like. Even when I forgot who I was. You were my only memory that stayed warm in the cold." His voice was trembling now, barely held together by emotion. "If you asked me to disappear again, I would. But if you asked me to stay..." She didn't let him finish. "Then stay," she said, soft but firm. "Not as a promise. Not as a fix. Just stay. Today. Let's see what that feels like. For both of us." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something even more sacred. Permission. The world outside kept spinning, but for them, it was as if everything had paused. A single moment stretched long and wide enough to breathe in the truth, to taste the fragility of what they were trying to reclaim. Claire slowly let go of his hand and folded her arms gently over her lap. "Do you remember our last Christmas together?" she asked, the question catching him off guard. Daniel blinked. "The one with the snowstorm," he replied. "We lost power for 2 days, and we lit every candle in the house." His voice softened at the memory. "You made me sing carols with you even though I was completely off key." Claire laughed quietly. "You were terrible," she said, "but I loved it. I remember the sound of your voice more than any gift I ever received, and the way you made me feel like everything was going to be all right, even when the house was freezing and the lights were out. Her voice grew wistful. That's the last time I remember feeling safe. Daniel bowed his head. I'm sorry I stole that from you, he murmured. I would give anything to go back and protect that night. To protect you. The regret in his voice was raw, almost too much to bear. But he didn't look away. He needed her to see the cost, even if she couldn't see his face. Claire nodded slowly. You can't change the past, she said. But you can help me believe in warmth again. In safety. In being able to trust that when someone says they won't leave, they mean it. She tilted her head. So tell me, are you still running? Daniel took a long, slow breath, as if her question had peeled away the last layer of armor he still wore. I'm tired of running, he said quietly. Every road, every city, every sleepless night, it always led back to you, even if I didn't admit it. I didn't realize until now that I wasn't running from danger. I was running from guilt. From this moment, Claire nodded slightly, her expression unreadable but focused, as though she were studying his soul through the weight of his words. You found it, she replied. The moment. The one you were afraid of. And look, you're still breathing. She leaned forward, her hands resting lightly on the table. So what are you going to do with it? He glanced down at their empty cups, now cold and forgotten. I want to be someone you can rely on again, he said. Not because of who I used to be, but because of who I've fought to become. His voice cracked. I want to give you reasons to feel safe again, even if it takes the rest of my life. Claire traced a finger along the grain of the wooden table, her touch delicate and precise. You talk about safety, she said, but that's not something you give once. It's something you prove over and over, with presence, with patience, with silence when words fall short. I don't need grand gestures. I need someone who stays when it's inconvenient. I will, Daniel replied, without hesitation this time. Not just for you, but for me too, because I'm tired of being a ghost in my own life. I want to be seen again, by the one person who always saw me best, even in darkness. A deep silence fell between them, no longer awkward or heavy, but almost reverent. Claire reached for the locket again, feeling its familiar coolness in her palm. You know, she said, I wore this every day for 15 years. People told me to let it go, that holding on to the past would keep me from healing. But I couldn't, because part of me always believed you're still out there. Daniel's eyes welled up. You were right, he whispered. I was out there. And the locket, it kept me alive too. Whenever I wanted to give up, I imagined you wearing it. I imagined you waiting, even if it was just in my dreams. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, desperate to be close to her without overwhelming her. She smiled faintly. Maybe we both survived because of hope, she said. Not the loud kind. The quiet, stubborn kind that doesn't let go, even when the world says it should. She folded her hands in front of her. But survival isn't living, Daniel. We've done enough of that. What does living look like to you? He hesitated. It looks like mornings that don't start with regret. Conversations that don't end in silence. It looks like being present. Here. With you. His voice deepened with emotion. It looks like rebuilding trust, one moment at a time. Claire breathed in deeply, slowly. Then let's find out what that looks like, she said. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. Right here. Because I've been blind long enough to know that sometimes the most important things can only be seen with the heart. Claire's words settled like sunlight through fog. Gentle, slow, illuminating something within Daniel that had long remained hidden in shadow. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched her, though she couldn't see him, realizing for the first time that her blindness didn't diminish her perception. It sharpened it. She saw with a clarity he had never possessed. And in that moment, he didn't feel pitted. He felt understood. He leaned back slightly, taking in the stillness of the moment. You've become someone extraordinary, he said softly. Stronger than anyone I've ever known. And I don't mean because you survived. I mean because you never let your pain turn into bitterness. You turned it into grace. He paused, then added, I'm not that person yet, but I want to be. Claire tilted her head, lips curled in a faint, knowing smile. The fact that you want to be already sets you apart, she replied. I don't need you to be perfect, Daniel. I need you to be real, honest, even if it's messy. She tapped her fingers gently against the locket, as if grounding herself in something old and steady. That's how healing begins. He nodded slowly. Then I'll be real with you, he said. Every day, even when it hurts, even when I don't know what I'm doing. I spent too many years hiding behind half-truths and regrets. I don't want to live like that anymore. Especially not with you. The cafe's lights flickered slightly as the sun outside began to set, casting long shadows across the floor. The shift in light didn't matter to Claire, but it symbolized something for Daniel, a turning point, a transition from what was to what could be. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that something good was beginning. They sat in silence, listening to the slow rhythm of spoons clinking and quiet conversations in the background. It wasn't the kind of silence that begged to be filled, but one that cradled two souls catching their breath. Claire broke it gently. "Do you remember how we used to dream up ridiculous futures?" she asked, a soft smile touching her lips. "You said we'd buy a boat and live on the water. Said you'd write songs and I'd make jam." Daniel chuckled, the sound full of nostalgia. "I remember. You insisted on naming the boat the Wandering Star, even though you'd never been on one." He shook his head, still smiling. "We had no idea what we were talking about, but it felt real, didn't it? Like we could go anywhere, be anyone." Claire nodded. "That's what you gave me, Daniel. Possibility. A world bigger than what I could touch. Even now, sitting here, hearing you speak, I feel that again." She reached for her tea and took a sip, her movements smooth and precise. "I don't need a boat. I don't need jam. I just want to feel like that girl again, who believed anything was possible." "You still are that girl," he said quietly. "And I still want to be the boy who made you believe." His voice faltered for a moment. "But this time, I won't disappear when the storm comes. I'll stay, even if it means anchoring the boat instead of sailing it." Claire tilted her head in his direction. "Then maybe," she whispered, "we were never meant to wander. Maybe we were meant to return." Her voice carried a tenderness that felt like forgiveness, not full, not final, but enough to soften what had once been sharp. And that was more than Daniel had dared to hope for. Daniel's chest tightened with her words. Meant to return. It echoed through him like a forgotten lullaby, one that once lulled him into dreams before nightmares took their place. He let it linger, tasting its meaning. "I don't think I ever left you," he said slowly. "Not really. I think I tried to erase myself to survive. But you were the only part of me I didn't know how to let go." Claire's fingers curled lightly around the locket again. "I carried your memory like a secret," she admitted. "There were days I hated myself for still hoping. Days I thought I was pathetic for wearing this around my neck. But now I see. Maybe I wasn't holding on to pain. Maybe I was holding on to purpose." Daniel looked down, his throat aching with emotion. "You were always stronger than me," he said. "Even when we were kids. You had this way of seeing the world. Not just what it was, but what it could be. You always saw people as they could become, not just who they were. Even me." She gave a gentle nod. "I believed in you because you gave me something to believe in." Her voice was firm now, laced with that same quiet courage that once led her to explore the woods blindfolded, just to prove she wasn't afraid of the dark. "But I can't rebuild this alone. If we're going to do this, whatever this becomes, it has to be together. No more ghosts. No more hiding." Daniel reached across the table again, his hand hovering for a moment before she found it. Their fingers interlocked. "Together," he whispered. "No more running. No more silence. Just us. Day by day." Outside, the street lights flickered to life, casting golden reflections on the cafe windows. Inside, the warmth of the moment wrapped around them like a quiet fire, steady, calm, enduring. Claire leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Tell me something real," she said. "Not about the past. About now. Something you've never said out loud." Daniel paused, surprised by the request, but only for a moment. "Sometimes," he began, "I wake up in the middle of the night and forget where I am. It happens even when I'm somewhere safe. I still expect sirens, or footsteps, or doors slamming. I haven't had a peaceful night's sleep in over a decade." Claire didn't respond right away. Her hand gently squeezed his, as if acknowledging every unsaid part of his trauma. "That's what survival does," she murmured. "It sharpens your senses until they start to eat you alive. I may not see anymore, but my body still flinches at silence too deep. I've learned to measure the safety of a room by how it smells, how the air moves. He let out a breath, almost a laugh, but not from amusement, from recognition. Maybe we're both learning how to be safe again, he said, not from the world, but from the weight we carry inside ourselves. Claire nodded slowly. Then let's start with tonight, she said. Let's make this table the first safe place. No expectations, just honesty, and the choice to be here. Daniel's grip tightened gently on her hand. Then I choose this moment. I choose you. Even if I don't deserve it, I choose you. Claire sat quietly for a few moments, letting his words wash over her. There was something different in the way he said them, not as a plea, not as an apology, but as a truth offered freely. She turned her face toward him, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. I think choosing is more powerful than deserving, she said softly. Deserving is passive. Choosing takes courage. Daniel nodded slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. Then maybe for the first time in my life, I'm being brave. He looked around the cafe, its warm lights casting soft glows against the darkening sky. Everything about the room felt ordinary, except her. Except this moment. You know what I used to miss the most? He asked. Your stories. You used to make up whole worlds while we sat on the porch. Claire smiled at the memory. I needed stories, she replied. They helped me survive. Helped me believe there was still something good in the world, even when my own world was falling apart. She reached across the table and found his wrist with ease. Would you like to hear one? He blinked, surprised. Now, she confirmed. Because maybe we need to start writing a new one. Together. She took a deep breath, then began. Once upon a time, there was a boy who got lost. Not in the woods, not in the city, but inside his own heart. And no matter how far he traveled, he couldn't outrun the sound of a girl calling his name. Daniel smiled, the corners of his eyes glistening. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, letting her voice carry them both into a story they had never told. One that, this time, wasn't about what was lost, but about what was finally being found. Claire continued, her voice smooth and steady. The boy wandered through storms and silence, through hunger and fear, but always with her voice echoing like a lighthouse in his chest. And one day, when he had nearly forgotten who he was, he followed the sound back to a place he didn't expect, a small cafe, with a table by the window, and the girl waiting. Daniel didn't realize he was holding his breath until it escaped as a quiet exhale. The story wasn't just a tale, it was a mirror, and in it, he saw the path that had led him here, the pain that had shaped him, and the hope that still flickered in the spaces between their words. Claire reached the end of her story with a quiet, simple line. And though he still had scars, and she still had shadows, they decided to stop surviving and start living. She folded her hands, letting the silence settle like a final page turned. What do you think? She asked. Daniel's voice cracked as he answered. I think that's the most beautiful story I've ever heard. Because it's ours. And because it doesn't pretend the pain never happened. It lets the pain belong, and then it rises above it. She nodded. Stories are how we heal. And maybe now, we're finally ready to write the rest. Not in fear, not in regret, but in presence. One word at a time. Outside, the night had fully fallen. But inside the cafe, between them, a light had been lit. One not bound to sight or sound, but to something far more enduring. Something that had waited patiently through the years to be spoken aloud at last. The cafe had thinned out, a few tables cleared, soft jazz now barely audible in the background. But neither of them noticed the time. To Daniel, every minute at that table felt suspended, as if the world outside had paused to give them room to breathe. It's strange, he said, voice low. I've spoken to 1,000 people over the years, but I've never felt heard until today. Claire tilted her head slightly. Because today you didn't need to pretend, she said. You didn't have to be the runaway, or the lost boy, or the man hardened by the streets. You just had to be Daniel. Her tone was gentle but unwavering, and I've waited a long time to speak to him again. He blinked slowly, overwhelmed by the weight of her perception. What do you see when you think of me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid the answer might undo him. Not who I was, not what I did, but who I am now. Claire reached forward, her hand resting lightly over his heart. I see someone trying, she said. Someone broken, yes, but not shattered. Someone who's been in the fire and came out softer, not colder. That takes strength most people never learn. She paused, then added, and I see someone worth choosing. Daniel's eyes welled with tears. I don't know how to thank you, he said. Not just for this moment, but for holding on to the memory of me, even when I didn't deserve to be remembered. Claire shook her head gently. You don't have to thank me, she said. Just don't waste this. Don't let it slip away like so many other things in our lives. Be here, every day, in truth. That's enough. They sat in that truth, quiet but not distant, letting the closeness settle around them like a familiar blanket. Outside, a light rain had begun to fall, drops streaking the window in slow patterns. Claire turned her head toward the sound, her expression softening. I always loved the rain, she murmured. Before I lost my sight, I used to watch it trace paths on the glass. Now I listen, and somehow it still brings peace. Daniel followed her gaze instinctively, though she couldn't see him. I used to watch it too, he said, especially after I lost everything. Rain felt like the world crying with me. But today it feels different, like it's cleansing something old, making space for something new. Claire smiled faintly. Funny how we both lost our way, but the same rain followed us. Maybe it was always leading us back here. Her fingers moved across the table until they brushed us again. It's poetic, don't you think? He nodded, voice thick. It's more than poetic. It's sacred. Then, as if the thought had been sitting quietly all along, he asked, Claire, if this is the beginning of something, what do we do with the rest of it? The pain, the years we missed, the people we lost. She sat with that question for a long moment. We carry them, she said finally, not as weights to drag us down, but as reminders. We don't ignore the scars. We let them remind us that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to keep walking. Daniel breathed deeply, taking in every word. Then let's walk together, he said. No maps, no guarantees. Just two people brave enough to keep going. Claire nodded once. Then we begin now. Step 1. Finish this tea before it turns to ice. She smiled. And for the first time in 15 years, so did he. Not with sorrow, but with hope. The gentle sound of rain tapping against the windows created a rhythm that neither of them needed to fill. Claire lifted her cup with both hands, taking a sip before placing it down again. Do you ever think, she asked quietly, that the people we become are shaped more by the losses we endure than the victories we celebrate? Daniel considered the question. I think loss strips away the illusions, he said. It shows us who we are when there's nothing left to hide behind. And sometimes, it builds us into something stronger, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. He looked across the table. You're living proof of that. Claire tilted her head thoughtfully. Pain teaches, yes, but it also tempts us to close off, to build walls so high that no one can climb over them. Her voice softened. For a long time, I thought I was safer behind those walls. But now, I wonder how much I missed by staying hidden. Daniel reached out, his fingertips brushing hers. We both missed a lot, he said. But we're here now. And maybe that's the miracle. That even after everything, we found each other again. Not in the places we once knew, but in who we've become. She didn't speak for a while, her thumb circling the rim of her cup. Then maybe this is what healing really looks like, she finally whispered. Not fixing the broken pieces, but learning to hold them without cutting ourselves anymore. The rain continued its soft descent, the cafe glowing with quiet intimacy. Around them, the staff moved slowly, beginning to prepare for closing, but giving the pair at the corner table their space. Claire lifted her head slightly. You said earlier that you don't sleep well, she said. Do you think it will ever change? Daniel gave a small smile. If tonight is any sign, he said, I think it's already starting to. He exhaled. Maybe the body remembers safety. Maybe it just needs time, and the right person, to remind it what peace feels like. Claire traced her fingers gently along the tabletop, finding its edges. And when you dream? She asked. What do you see now, Daniel? He blinked slowly, eyes shimmering. I used to dream of running, always in shadows, always chased. But now he paused. Now I see a table by the window. A woman who listens with her whole heart. A voice I thought I'd never hear again. And for once, I don't wake up afraid. She nodded, letting his words rest between them. Then that's enough for today, she said. We don't need to plan tomorrow. Not yet. Today is full. It's enough. Her voice held a calm finality, Not an end, but a quiet acknowledgement that the storm had passed, if only for this moment. Daniel sat back, his hand still touching hers. Then let's hold on to today, he said. Let's not rush past it. He looked around the cafe, then back to her. Because this, right now, feels like the start of everything. The final customers filed out one by one, and the staff dimmed the lights slightly, casting the room in a warm, amber glow. It was a quiet signal that the evening was drawing to a close, but neither Claire nor Daniel made a move to stand. There was something sacred about their presence at the table, like time itself had slowed just for them. Claire turned her head slightly, sensing the shift in the air. They're closing soon, she said, her voice calm. But I'm not ready to leave. Daniel shook his head. Me neither, he replied. Not because I want to stay here forever, but because for the first time in years, I'm not trying to escape the moment I'm in. He leaned forward. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, Claire, but I want to face it with you, even if we take it 1 hour at a time. She smiled gently, resting her hands in her lap. Then maybe we don't leave yet, she said. Not until we say the things that still need to be said. The things we were too young, or too scared, to say before. She paused, then asked, What's something you regret never telling me? Daniel looked down, his brows drawing together in thought. That you were the only person who ever made me feel like I mattered, he said. Not because of what I did, but because of who I was. And that no matter how far I went, that truth never left me. I regret not saying that out loud before I ran. Claire was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I regret not chasing after you. Her voice trembled slightly. Even when they said you were gone. Even when I couldn't see anymore. A part of me knew you were still out there. But I was afraid that hoping would break me. She reached for him across the table. But maybe hope is what saved us. Their hands met in the middle of the table again, gently, naturally. Daniel turned his palm upward, allowing her fingers to rest inside his like something familiar, finally returning to its place. The weight of unsaid years still lingered between them, but now it no longer held them back. It connected them. I'm sorry, he said again, and this time it wasn't a confession. It was a vow, not just for leaving, for staying away. Claire nodded, her expression unreadable but serene. And I'm sorry for holding on so tightly to pain that I almost forgot what healing felt like. Her thumb moved slowly against his hand. But now I see that letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It just means choosing to live differently. The cafe manager approached quietly, her tone respectful. We'll be closing in 15 minutes, just so you know. Claire turned toward the voice, offering a kind smile. Thank you, she replied. The woman hesitated, glancing between the two, as if sensing the gravity of their moment, then nodded and walked away. Daniel glanced at the clock, but made no move to stand. We should go soon, he said, but I don't want this to end. Not like this. Not just walking away and pretending this was a moment in time. Because it wasn't. It was a doorway. Claire reached for her cane, resting it beside her chair, but didn't stand either. Then let's step through it, she said. Let's not rush to define what comes next. Let's just promise that whatever it is, we won't face it alone. Daniel looked at her, really looked, not with guilt or longing, but with clarity. Then I'm with you, however long the road is, however many steps it takes. And with those words, for the first time in their shared history, the future didn't feel distant. It felt near. The cafe was nearly empty now, the echoes of voices replaced by the quiet hum of the dishwasher in the back. The atmosphere had shifted, not to an ending, but to a quiet pause before something new. Claire slowly stood from her chair, her movements practiced and graceful, the cane lightly tapping the floor as she oriented herself. Daniel instinctively rose with her, not to assist out of pity, but in reverence, out of respect for every step she had learned to take alone. For a moment, they simply stood across from one another, not speaking. Claire held her hand out, and he took it, not hurriedly, but with a kind of tenderness that only time and loss could teach. You know, she said, I never thought I'd see you again. And I don't mean with my eyes. I mean here, facing me, unafraid, with all your scars visible. Daniel gave a soft smile. Maybe that's the only way we ever really see each other, he said, when we stop trying to hide what hurt us. He reached forward and gently adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. It was a small gesture, but filled with meaning. He remembered how much she used to hate when others assumed she needed help. This wasn't assumption, it was remembrance. As they walked slowly toward the door, the sound of the rain tapping on the pavement greeted them again. Claire paused just before stepping outside. I always thought reunions came with fanfare, she said. Big speeches. Happy tears. But maybe the real ones come with quiet hands and open hearts. Daniel opened the door for her, then stepped out into the mist at her side. No fireworks, he said. Just two people who finally found the courage to speak when it mattered most. And in that moment, neither of them felt blind. Neither of them felt broken. They simply felt whole. The rain had softened into a drizzle, the pavement glistening under the dim yellow glow of the streetlights. Claire tilted her head slightly toward the sound of tires passing in the distance, the wet hiss of rubber on asphalt. Funny, she said quietly, how the world keeps moving, even when your whole life feels like it stopped. Daniel glanced at her, watching as she stood with complete calm, unafraid of the dark, of the wet, of the uncertainty. Maybe the world doesn't stop, he said, but maybe we just need moments like this to catch up, to breathe, to remember we're still part of it. They began walking slowly down the sidewalk, their steps in rhythm, her cane tapping lightly beside them. Claire didn't need direction. She trusted the world more than most. Or perhaps, she trusted herself within it. I used to walk this street every Friday, she said. Same cafe, same corner. Always wondering if something, or someone, might surprise me. Daniel smiled. I guess I'm 15 years late. He hesitated, then added, but I'm here now, and I don't want to disappear again. Not from this. Not from you. Claire stopped, turning to him. She reached for his hand, and he gave it freely. Then don't, she said. But if you stay, stay with both feet in. No more shadows. No more apologies. Just presence. That's what I need now. He nodded, the streetlight casting a faint shimmer on his damp hair. Then presence is what I'll give, he said. One day at a time. One step at a time. If you'll have me. And in that quiet exchange, without grand declarations or rehearsed vows, they stepped into something fragile and new. Something made not from what they had lost, but from all they had survived to find again. The night deepened around them, the city humming softly in the background. They continued walking, side by side, their hands loosely intertwined. No destination had been named, and yet they both knew, without speaking, that they weren't going anywhere in particular. This wasn't a walk to arrive. It was a walk to remain, to feel the air, the silence, the presence of each other in the spaces where fear used to live. Claire took a breath, slow and full. It's strange, she said, how my life has been measured in absence for so long. Days without answers, nights without sleep, years without you. And now, here you are, and I don't quite know how to measure this. She turned her head toward him. What is this, Daniel? He didn't answer right away. He squeezed her hand gently, choosing his words with care. It's not an apology, he said, and it's not a second chance either. It's something entirely new. It's the part of the story that doesn't try to rewrite the past. It just turns the page. His voice was quiet but firm. It's the beginning of who we are now. Claire let that sink in. Her cane tapped gently along the sidewalk, keeping rhythm with her thoughts. Then maybe this is the first time we've ever truly met, she said. Not as children, not as victims of time, but as people who've walked through fire and still have something left to give. Daniel stopped walking. She felt the shift in his pace and turned toward him. What is it? She asked. He looked at her, his voice trembling slightly. I think I've been waiting my whole life for this version of you. And I think I've been afraid of whether I could ever be the version you deserve. Claire stepped closer, the rain misting against her face. She raised her hand to his cheek, the movement slow and sure. Her fingers found his skin, traced the lines time had drawn, the places where life had left its mark. There's no version of you that I was waiting for, she said softly. Only the one that showed up. Daniel closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. Then I'm here, he whispered. Not as who I should have been, just as I am. And that's enough, she replied. Because you came back. Because you spoke. Because you stayed. Her voice wavered slightly, but didn't break. You stayed. They stood in the middle of the sidewalk, the world moving around them, and yet they were still. In a city filled with noise, they had found something rare, something silent and strong and real. Two people, once broken by distance, now held together not by perfection, but by truth. The rain fell gently, almost blessing the moment. And as they turned and continued walking, their footsteps soft and steady, there were no promises spoken aloud. Only presence, only breath, only the quiet miracle of two hearts that had finally found their way home. Some stories don't need dramatic endings. They need honest ones. And this story, though soaked in silence, regret, and years lost to fear, finds its meaning not in reunion alone, but in what comes after, the courage to stay. It teaches us that presence is sometimes more powerful than apology, that showing up, fully, vulnerably, is the purest act of redemption. Claire and Daniel's path wasn't paved with perfect timing or flawless choices, but with the quiet decision to begin again. What they found in that cafe was not closure, but awakening. An awakening to the truth that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering with open hands instead of clenched fists. It's allowing someone back into the space they once broke, not because they've earned it, but because they've changed. And more importantly, because you've changed too. Their journey reminds us that time does not heal all wounds. Presence does. Truth does. Love does, when it chooses to remain. As they walked into the night, no grand declarations were made. But something sacred happened. Two people, once shattered by absence, chose to carry each other's scars instead of letting them divide. That choice is where hope lives. That choice is where the story truly begins. It's a reflection of the strength we often bury beneath survival. And it dares us to believe that even after the deepest heartbreak, something whole can still rise. So maybe the question isn't whether the past can be undone. Maybe the real question is this: who would you become if you stopped running from your own story? What could be rebuilt if you allowed yourself to sit at the table of someone you once lost and simply listened? The answers don't come easy, but sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stay until they arrive. If this story moved you, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. What would you say if you sat face to face with someone from your past? Subscribe to the channel for more stories that go beyond the surface, that echo long after the video ends. And if this touched your heart, leave a like. It helps more souls find their way back to stories that matter.